Hello, peoples of the internet, and welcome to another Stairway Mountain time trial, where today we have a moonhawk. But as you may be able to tell from the bonnet scoop thingy, it's no ordinary moonhawk. It's the drag moonhawk. Because I've decided to do drag week since I've had a lot of sensible vehicles and I knocked my mirror off. And I want to do some vehicles that shouldn't be driven around corners because, hey, that's fun, isn't it? Especially when I crash them and have to make many reruns and stress myself. Yay! Anyway, it's an interesting vehicle because you have to be so careful around corners, but if you get it right, then you can floor it. It does have a tendency to go on two or even one wheel though, so that's a bit of a problem, and it will roll if you try and corner too harshly, although it's not too bad. I'd say the likes of the Roma Custom were more likely to roll. It's got a whole lot of power though. Probably the most powerful vehicle we've got here. I believe it's a stage 2 supercharger on this. It makes 1272 horsepower apparently and has a 4-speed automatic transmission as well as a plus track limited slip differential, which means it has the power and it puts it down quite well. It just really struggles to go around corners. It's kind of the opposite of the Pigeon. The Pigeon was over-reliant on too little front grip. This is under-reliant on too little front grip. It's just, you expect the rear wheels to do everything. It might have counted for something if it had 4-wheel steer, but it doesn't, which is annoying. And yes, I had a big off-roady moment there. I did find the way to take the corners was generally slowing fast out. That seemed to work quite well. You brake before the corner, you go to the inside, and then you give it a bit of space, and a bit of power and go to the outside. My cornering speed is never particularly high though. This is also a heavy vehicle as it weighs 1745 kilograms, which is similar to the Burnside I took around many moons ago actually. It's not light, but it has the power and torque to easily put up with that weight. To be honest, I never felt the weight was a problem, so it's not, I guess. It's at an interesting time though. The Roma Custom, I mentioned earlier, actually sits about 6.5 seconds below it, which is interesting because that Roma Custom was a pretty nice vehicle to drive, other than that fact that it would roll over if you really weren't careful. This is just not a handling car, but I guess ultimately the grip helps and the grip pulls it along, as well as great power, and you do let the power free, it does fly, as it did on the end straight, which was very convenient. That probably pushed it up a place or two, to be honest, just the fact that I could let all the power out and let it fly across the line in a way other cars just couldn't. It actually beat the Covet Race, which is interesting as well, because that's a proper race car designed to go round corners, given it does make under 200 horsepower and this makes under 1300, so I guess that's not a fair comparison. And it just got beaten by the Pessima all-wheel steering touring car, so it's with the front wheel drives, but that's for something that's not even meant to go around corners as such. It's just meant to set good quarter-mile, half-mile, mile drag times as opposed to actually being a handling machine. And it's interesting, it really is. But I said what I needed to, so I'll speak of getting it up onto the end where it got pretty messed up. The moment I hit that bump was the moment I destroyed the radiator. Yeah. It didn't take much, just a small bump at the end, and that killed the radiator, and then the car flew all out of control, rolled all over the place, and that was annoying. Other than that, the car was a wreck, and it was starved of oil apparently, but it still drives somewhat. So that was surprising actually. After all the smashing it had, the engine and driveline were still going, just the steering was completely destroyed. But that's all I've got to say for this vehicle. So, on to the next vehicle. Next up we have the Pigeon 600cc Turbo. Only I've not made a mistake. This is the updated drag version with the fender flares and 260 horsepower, which is far too much for a Pigeon, and as you'll see I'm rolling it a lot. It's a little easier to drive than the 200 horsepower Turbo I did back in the day, I would say, just because it's naturally got the flared wheel arches and the tyres don't pop in the crazy way you did on that, meaning I can carry more speed on the exits of corners, which is not great because that means I have to corner and brake harder, which is never good in a Pigeon. As you'll see, I bumped the wall there, and that was a minor crash by this thing's standards. It will lift one or two of the rear wheels under braking, and that's when it goes mad, and that's what happens though if you don't know how to brake with it, like I didn't. You just have to be calm all around, really calm. It took me a countless number of tries to get it right, so that was not good. But it's 260 horsepower in, 500 kilograms? Should be good, right? Well, that's where you'd be wrong, because it isn't. It's at a reasonable time. I'd say a bit faster than the normal one, but it's still a Pigeon. It's not actually that far off the four-wheel drive, which is interesting, because four-wheel drive was naturally a whole lot nicer to drive, as you would expect. It didn't tip, so for a three-wheeled Pigeon to come that close is very impressive. And when I got to the end, my hard work of keeping the Pigeon in good condition was all thrown away, and the car got destroyed, if you can even call it a car. So there was nothing left. But hey, it's a Pigeon. It doesn't want to survive, it wanted to crash, and it eventually got its way. So, all being said and done, on to the next vehicle. Okay, so here we have a blast from the past, as in this is the Burnside Drag. It's got a police livery on it for some reason. I don't know, maybe it's justification for going quick. And it handles a lot like the Moonhawk, only with slightly more refined suspension, which is perhaps surprising for an older vehicle. But I don't know. I'm not sure about the power weight again, but as I said, it's similar to the Burnside. You have power, and you can apply the power, but it's just not the very easiest vehicle to drive. And a lot of that is the understeer, which, as with the Moonhawk, did get in the way. But there's not really much I can say. I mean, other than the odd knock and bump, as you're seeing here, I actually got a really clean one to the end. And the time was definitely slower than the others, but it was still a pretty good time. It beat the CRX race and came just below the Bolide convertible, which is pretty respectable, if slower than the Moonhawk Drag as well. And that sentence didn't make sense. Forgive me. Speaking of the good clean one I had though, it took me a few tries, but when I did eventually get it to the end, all the car got smashed and ruined, because that's what happens when you drive this car over the bump at the end. It gets ruined. Okay, on to the next vehicle. Okay, so here from the struggle to launch a car in the correct view you saw, you may have noticed it's a 200BX. The moment of the video I would normally go on about what a horrible slidey mess it is, but for once I won't be going on about that. I'll be going on about what a crazy fragile mess it is, because the front wheels on this do not last. It could be to do with them being bigger, but a simple smash onto the road can destroy them. And that's the major annoyance of it, really. The rear wheels are more resilient, but the front wheels, you hit a small bump, you can get knocked loose, and that'll ruin the whole cornering balance of the vehicle. And I don't believe I had a single one where I didn't destroy them. I actually had 1 in 43 runs where I got this thing to the end. And the other reason, it's really typical drag car stuff, which is the brakes are a bit dodgy when you really hammer them, and it lifts the rear wheels off the ground, which are the main grip part of a car, really. Speaking of which, it was actually quite nice round corners as far as 200 VXs go. It had a lot of grip, and other than its tendency to lift the front wheels, it had pretty good turning. And that's really where the problems get in the way, because it could have been an incredibly good car. It could have topped the leaderboard even if it didn't have such a fragile front axle. But it did. As far as power and weight are concerned, I'm not too sure, but I don't imagine it being as heavy as the muscle cars, or as powerful as them. It did feel quite quick though. This is a turbo dragster here. We've got not the non-turbo. I've got a range of mods on my PC. It's hard to place where they're from, to be honest, a lot of the time. Well, they're from the BeamNG website, but I've just got too many, to put it simply. Back on subject. I had a bit of a roly-poly do near the end. That would normally be unrecoverable and I would be screaming at the computer, but I somehow managed to save it. Yes, it slowed me down, but I'm not going to worry about that because I wasn't going to get a better run than that without another 43 tries. And upon getting it to the end, it was smashed up pretty badly. A lot by the crazy roly-poly do, and then it was finished off by the ramp at the end. To put it simply, it was a write-off, and it was always going to be a write-off with that dodgy front axle. And hey, I would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for that meddling axle. Sorry, I had to say it. On to the next video. Okay, so here we have the Gavril D-Series Drag. It's basically a drag pickup truck, which is the best way to describe it, I think. It's got the supercharged V8 making 475 horsepower, which compared to some of the other vehicles is definitely underpowered. But that's okay because it makes it more manageable. As much as it's probably worse for actual drag racing around a track or a street course or hill, as we're racing down here, it's actually a whole lot more reasonable to drive, and that's a good thing. It's got less understeer than the other drag vehicles, although it will still understeer just due to the massive difference in tyre width at the front and rear. But I think it's a pretty solid vehicle and one I would actually be quite happy to take around a track. It didn't take me many runs to get this to the end, even. I had a run, got it to the end, and then I did another one, but it was no better, so I decided to use the first one. And that's something which is incredible, because for a drag vehicle, I got it to the end in next to no tries, and it's something that would seem impossible. So, yeah, a vehicle I like driving. Less powerful in a straight line, but pretty good overall. It's at a good time as well, although naturally the lack in power does show here. It came between the ETK V8 twin turbo and the Gavril Super Sport van, which, although not at the very, very top of the leaderboard, I think is a pretty respectable time. By the time I was getting it to the end, it survived pretty well. It had the obvious scars from me being stupid and throwing it into walls and things, but other than that, it survived and it still worked. The radiator was broken, but the truck was operatable. and drivable, although the worst that may have been the steering being a bit bent, but other than that, I could have kept on driving it. So with all being said and done, on to the next vehicle. Okay, so here we have the Roma Drag version, which is basically the D series with softer suspension and all that might imply. It's got the same kind of speed to it, only it does seem to understeer a little more, and the suspension is softer, which makes it bouncier but better over bumps. And that's all I can say, really. There's not much that's different from the D series. It's a bit slower as a result of its tuning by about 10 seconds, but other than that, it performs very similarly. Now we have the vehicle came between a SBR4 base model and a Pessima 2-litre turbo, which I think is a 90s model, and it's a pretty respectable time, but compared to some of the drag vehicles it's a little disappointing. I mean, getting it to the end of the course was more of the same again. It had the scars of life like the D series, but other than that it survived quite well, and it still worked, so it's not much of a in-depth analysation of it, I guess, but that's just so similar to the D series. Thanks for watching, and goodbye until another day.